When I think of exciting themes for board games, I usually imagine things like valiant medieval warriors, heroic space explorers, or even shrewd merchants trading goods in 18th century Europe. Quilting doesn't even make the list, or if it does, it ranks just above tax accounting. So, could a game about making a colorful quilt actually be fun? Today on Game On Video Reviews, we'll answer that very question as we take a closer look at Patchwork. So here's a setup for a game of Patchwork. You have this thing called a central time board in the middle, and then 33 patch tiles that are going to be arranged in sort of a circle or oval around that central time board. You have a neutral pawn, which is going to go right into this space right here next to that token right there. And then you're also going to have a pile of buttons, which represent the currency in this game. You have this thing called a 7x7 token, which we'll talk about during scoring. And then each player is going to get their own player board. There's a green player and a yellow player, and then each player will get one of those and 5 buttons to start off as their starting currency. Let's take a little closer look at the central time board. So the central time board is kind of a spiral pattern here, and you'll have your 2 player tokens which will start off in the start space, and then you're going to have these little single patch tiles that are go onto the spaces that are marked right there. There's 5 of those in the game. So you'll set those things up, and then you're ready to start a game of Patchwork. Let's take a look at what a turn looks like. Now on your turn you have one of 2 options, and the first one is to buy a patch that you're going to put onto your player board. Now this neutral token will start off to the left of this particular token at the beginning of the game, and then it's going to travel around the board as patches gets purchased. And you always have available to you the 3 patches that are right in front of the neutral token in a clockwise direction. So let's say that I wanted to purchase this particular patch. Then I would take the neutral token and I would move it into the position where that patch was. Then I would have to buy this patch by spending buttons and time. So the buttons are just spent in button tokens. I would just turn that back into the supply. And then I would have to spend time. Time is spent by moving your token along on the player board here. So for this particular patch that costs 1 button and 2 time, I would move my marker 2 spaces forward for 2 time. And then I would be able to place the patch onto my board in any spot that I wanted to. The other option you have in your turn is to advance and receive buttons. And so this can only be done if you are the player that is in second place on the time track here. And what you would do if I was yellow on my turn, if I chose to advance and receive buttons, then I would move my marker until it was 1 space in front of the other player's marker. And then I would collect buttons equal to the number of spaces that I moved. So in this case, I moved 1, 2, 3 spaces, so I would collect 3 buttons from the supply. As the game progresses, if you move your player marker across one of the spaces that has one of these single patches in it, then you would just immediately add that to your board. And this is the only way that you can fill single spaces on your board. Also, if you happen to cross a space that has a button on it, then you'll get what's called button income. When you cross the button income space, you'll then take a look at your player board and count up the total number of buttons that are visible on patches that you've placed there. And then you'll collect button income equal to that number. In this case, the player would receive 6 button income. It should also be noted that this board represents a time track, and so it is always your turn if you are not in first place on this time track. And so you will continue to take turns until your player marker is ahead of your opponent's marker. So in this case, if this yellow player were to use his turn to purchase a patch that costs 2 time, he would spend 1, 2 time, but since he's still behind, it would still be his turn. So perhaps he would like to make a choice to get button income this time. So he would advance 1, 2 until he's ahead of this player. He would collect 2 button income. He would actually also collect button income for having crossed this button space. And then, since he's ahead, that would be the end of his turns, and now it is the green player's turn. Play will continue in this manner until both players have reached the final space. And then the game will end, and we'll do final scoring. For final scoring, first you'll look at the number of buttons that each player has. This player has 20 buttons. Those are going to be positive points. But then you're going to lose 2 points for every empty space that's left in your patchwork quilt. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 times 2 is 10 points. 20 minus 10, this player's final score would be 10 points. Also, it should be noted that there is a tile called the 7x7 tile, and the first player to fill up a complete 7x7 grid on their board will get this token that's worth 7 buttons at the end. These boards are 9x9, so you have to fill up a 7x7 square to get that token. You'll add up your score, and whoever has the highest number of points is the winner of Patchwork. Now, this isn't the last time you'll hear me say this in my reviews, but I'm always very impressed when a designer can take a simple and streamlined rule set and create a game that has some strategic depth to it. And I think that Rosenberg has definitely done that with Patchwork. Because in the game, you really only have, 2 decisions, as I said in the overview. You can either buy a patch and put it into your quilt, or you can move your token forward and get buttons. That's it. But out of that, there's a lot of different interesting decisions that you can make about how many turns you want to take because of that interesting time mechanic. That's a time mechanic that's actually been used in a couple of other games. Thebes and Red November come to mind, and I like that quite a bit. So you could take multiple turns. I think that's neat. And then you also have to decide whether you want to go for that 7x7 token, or are you just trying to go for buttons. The button income spaces on the board make it very interesting as to how far do you want to move ahead to get those buttons. And you might be finding yourself in an economic deficit with buttons, and you're really looking to push yourself forward so you can get that button income. So a lot of things going on here, and that's in a game that plays in only 30 minutes, and and really, if the box says 30 minutes, it's going to be 30 minutes maximum. So this is a great game that you can take out, set up, super easy to teach, and have an enjoyable 30-minute experience with a friend or loved one. So as far as 2-player games go that fit into this category, this is extremely high on my list. And I think it's very interesting that Uwe Rosenberg, his other 2 sort of crowning achievements in games, Agricola and Caverna, are very long, very complex games with multiple paths to victory, take multiple hours to play. And yet he was still able to design a game like Patchwork, which is a short game, very simple rule set, and yet has a lot of fun and has some interesting strategic depth to it. So I would highly recommend that you check it out if you're looking for a good 2-player game to play in 30 minutes, to have a lot of fun. Patchwork.